You're listening to Politics and Issues with Larry Marino.
Jeffrey Clayton is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. Jeffrey, thanks for being on the program today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, set this up for us, because I remember that as voters, we were going to get the chance to reject this no bail thing, and then I think voters did want to have bail, and now there's people in Sacramento that don't care about the voters, and they're bringing back the no bail or something like it. Take us into this story. We're so busy with our workaday world, these things slip by us, and they're very, very impactful. Very scary stuff, letting people out without paying bail. Walk us into this story.
Absolutely. So in 2018, legislation was passed to basically eliminate bail in California, use a computer algorithm to decide who was in and who was out. And that was what the voters voted on. Proposition 25 this past November, rejected it by an 11-point margin, which really we took to mean that they want to keep the right to bail. They like the present system. And obviously that's not to say that there can't be some reforms, but by and large, they like the system. So in January, Senator Robert Hertzberg, who carried the original bill along with Assemblyman now Attorney General Bonta, introduced Senate Bill 262, which was essentially a bill to take what the Supreme Court did during the pandemic, the zero bail schedule, and mandate zero bail in all those crimes across California. And then ultimately it morphed into another bill at the end, only to be shelved and now to be looked at sometime in the future.
Okay, so the argument on the other side is that, there are some people who have been accused of a crime and they just don't have the resources to have the same access to be out on bail as the rest of us. And therefore, we've got to do something to make it more fair. You've heard that, right?
Absolutely. I think, the argument was answered and the question was answered by the California Supreme Court earlier in the year when they said, hey, listen, after a certain period of time, when the bail set by a bail schedule or a judge, we're going to have to look at this and we're going to require prosecutors to put on more proof to make sure that's not the only reason they're there. In other words, they are a significant flight risk or they are a significant danger. And so the California Supreme Court has set up a procedural way where we're going to make sure that people aren't there solely because they can't afford bail. And certainly, the entire criminal justice system is harder on people without resources. I mean, we know that. We know the O.J. Simpson case. We know all that. But, I think they've done a good job at trying to balance that issue with the interest of the public, which is public safety.
Yeah. Now they can also say, well, you have a stake in the game, that you represent people who are in the bail industry, and they essentially could be wiped out if they're not making these bail kind of loans with bonds. It's a money thing. Just like teachers union don't like it when you talk about charter schools or school choice, right? I mean, they're gonna say you're not the guy to speak because you've got a hand in the till.
That's true, but I like to just focus on the merits. And I think, we allow people to exercise a constitutional right. That's why we're different than other industries. Other industries are things that are nice to haves or, different schools or different things like that, that they, manufacturing plastic bags, for example, which was a referendum several years ago, we can go to paper. Well, we can't go to another constitutional right. So the other thing that I think is the reality is that we help people who can't afford 100% bail to get out. And that's a positive thing. And the other thing that we do is we do a better job because of the arrest powers, that we can threaten to arrest and or arrest the person and have their family involved so that it actually performs a better service to the state of California.
But isn't this whole era of reduced bail part of that same thing that's happening with, DAs like Gascon and the one in San Francisco, that they're looking for some sort of equity in justice? People have been, poor people, minorities have been impacted more severely in the criminal justice system. So let's swing the bar the other way. Let's make it no bail. Isn't that really what it's about?
That is really what it was about. And I think this land apart case in Sacramento is a perfect example of that, where we go, well, the guy it's attempted auto theft, so let's automatically give him a zero bail. Well, turns out he was a two-striker, had a severe drug problem and a record a mile long, ultimately murders a woman and her dogs while he was on that zero bail that he failed to appear on. And so, yes, we have to look at the offender, and we can't just draw lines saying we don't like this, so we'll just get rid of it. That's not how it works in the criminal justice system at all. That's not a good solution at all.
No. It's interesting how the system works. There's, judges and prosecutors have no stake in the game. If they get, there's a story that I was just looking at. I mean, this one really got me. A guy out in the Inland Empire just got an $11 million settlement because the prosecutors convicted a guy, and now later on DNA evidence shows he didn't do the crime. I mean, he gave up 20 years of his life, and he gets $11 million. And I know it's one of those hypothetical things where, I was thinking for a second, I'd like to have $11 million. But when I want to give up 20 years of my life, there is something about the prosecution system that is about getting people, about winning prosecutions. How do we balance that, this adversarial system, with the bail system? Where does it all fit? Because stuff like that doesn't look good either. $11 million having to be paid out with tax money because some prosecutor convicted a guy who didn't do it.
No, it's governmental immunity, right? It's the King's law. We can shield, prosecutions and judges from negligent acts that, other people wouldn't be able to get away with. Attorneys in private practice wouldn't be able to get away with. The reality is that, the burden of the prosecutors to do substantial justice. But the problem right now is that nobody who is pro-criminal justice reform wants to invest in prosecutors. But that's what we need to do, is we need more fair-minded, balanced, experienced people in there to make individualized determinations, and more of them. Because if you see the caseloads, and if you've ever practiced criminal law, good luck getting a district attorney to call you back. It just doesn't happen at the misdemeanor level in particular, but even in felonies, you can often never get a phone call back because they're too overburdened and they can't practice law like everybody else. So,
and speaking of the misdemeanor level, what happened a few years ago? Voters were duped into saying, "Oh, let's not pick on these guys too hard. Let them steal $900 and whatever dollars each time and get their calculator out when they rip people off, and let's just not worry about prosecuting them because they're only misdemeanors." What has that brought us? That has brought us what you talk about, repeat offenders, lessened the quality of our life, increased your chances of having your place broken into, your car stolen, even, other crimes. These bad dudes do bad things. And there ought to be a system that, either doesn't give them bail or makes bail tough. The idea of letting everyone walk because it's hard on a few doesn't seem to cut it, does it?
No, and it's really about the offender, not the crime at this point. We have to hold people accountable for what they do when it's negative and it affects society, and they keep doing it over and over again, and that goes for shoplifting. And obviously what you've seen in California is we downgrade a bunch of felonies to misdemeanors, and then we say, well, misdemeanors are not important, so forget them. But those are former felony cases. And as you say, you do have offenders walking around with calculators in their pocket, and that's a real case that I've used around the country where the guy had calculated he was just under the felony threshold, and there was nothing they could do to him.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we now in all this process? Where is Hertzberg's bill? Did that get approved, and is it the governor signed it, or has it been shelved? What's going on? Because I know things happen fast in Sacramento. What is the very latest as we tape this?
Absolutely. Last week it got out of the Senate, and then it got to the Assembly, where it was made a 2-year bill, basically at the 11th hour, which means that it will come back and it'll be discussed in the interim. The legislature will reconvene in January, and they could run it early, but based on all the opposition and all the different interest groups involved, we expect it will take a little bit longer before they start talking about what might be the solution. Yeah.
And what can our listeners do if they want to be tough on crime and they don't want to see the bail system gone? People sometimes ask, well, I'm just an average citizen. What can I do to impact something like this? How do you get your voice heard? What do you need to happen in order to kill this thing or to get something that's a good plan through?
Well, you can go to visit us on the internet, AA Bail Coalition, or Twitter and Facebook. There's also an outlet called Safer Communities where you can email your legislator, and where there's updates put on about where the legislation is, what it does, and what you can do about it, whether you want to call them, email them, or tweet them. Your view, it does have an impact, and they do look at that.
Say that web address again. It went by way too fast.
You can go to our website, ambailcoalition.org, or you can go to Facebook and look up Safer Communities.
All right. Now, final minute. Give us some of these, for instance. How bad is it out there with these reductions taking place? And we're not the only place in the country that's kind of playing with this, are we?
No, I look at Houston, Texas as the comparable example. You've got a major city. You've got a district attorney like Gascon, elected by George Soros, who ran on bail reform, who went through a bail reform for 4 years, and 2 weeks ago issued a scathing report saying it didn't work. Pretrial crime has tripled. People showing up in court, they aren't doing it. It's become a total mess. The number of people on multiple felony bonds out at the same time has increased dramatically. They had one guy that was out on, I want to say, like 13 felony bonds at the same time. So it's just created a mess. And I think that example and other examples like that, the city of San Francisco, which has a 49% failure to appear rate, are going to change the conversation as we go forward, knowing that these policies just didn't work.
So explain to our listeners why they don't appear and why bail gets them to appear and what the bail hunter does, because a lot of us don't really know the fine details about how this works. What makes it work versus not work?
It's security for your release. In other words, you're putting up something that you stand to lose if you don't show up. And in California, 95% of people who post bail will use a bail agent, which means typically there's a third party involved with the bail agent that's posting the bond for you, both of whom are liable if you don't show up. And then, of course, everybody's familiar with Dog the Bounty Hunter or bail agent recovery that do have arrest powers across state lines. So if you flee and they can go international, a lot of suspects are hunted internationally from California. They will arrest you and return you to court. Otherwise, they'll have to pay the entire amount of the bond.
So it's skin in the game because these people who put up the bail bond have, in your interest that you show up. If you don't show, they're going to come looking for you. Whereas the government, he just didn't show. They're not going to do anything, are they?
Absolutely. I posted your bond. I can lose my assets, and the bail bondsman can lose their assets. So as a team, we're going to do everything we can to get you back.
Last 30 seconds, though, and on the other side, when they say, hey, a poor guy can't afford this, they don't have anything to put up. They don't have any money to even buy that bond. They're stuck in jail.
Well, that doesn't usually happen in California unless it's a severe offender, and they're probably not going to get out anyway. So California has alternatives for poor people in low-level cases, by and large. So when somebody's stuck in jail, it's generally for a reason. It's generally because they've committed a violent or serious felony.
Jeffrey Clayton is Executive Director of the American Bail Coalition. Thanks for joining us and talking about this story. Obviously, because it's a 2-year bill, it'll be back, right?
It sure will.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care now. Bye-bye.